this morning about the examples you follow. You know, we learn from examples, don't we?
Yes, sir.
When he's in school, you know, when we was being taught in school, they would show you a little example of the problem they said they was wanting you to learn. And we all have people that we've looked at and said, I want to be like that. You know, we all had heroes.
Come on, sir.
And folks, back when our children's heroes was people who did the right thing,
Amen.
this was a great country.
That's right.
And when we allowed our children to focus their eyes on heroes that was totally against God, it began to fall apart.
Yes, sir.
And see, we're in some dire situation. But let me tell you something, folks. The example you follow will determine the results of your journey.
Come on.
It will determine your harvest, the example you follow. We can be right in the middle, Lord, of all of this stuff that's going on. We don't have to follow the world's
Come
example.
on, sir. Thank you, Lord.
See, if your faith is not in Wall Street, what Wall Street does won't panic you.
Come on, sir.
If you're following the example that Jesus set, see, the example of the world has nothing to do with your end results.
That's right.
Yes, what happens in the world affects you, but it can't defeat you unless you're following that example. See? I was born the 7th of 8 children. So I had kids in the house that, you know, was older than me. And I learned pretty quick by following their example that you didn't push my little Indian mother too far. Because I saw the result of following that example. See?
Come on, sir. Come on.
It's the truth. I saw what happened.
Faithfully.
And so we need to look at what we're trying, you know, what we get attracted to, and see what's going to happen out there before we really hang on to something. We need to be following the right example. See, by following their example, I would have wound up just like they wound up. But I learned pretty quick, when you saw her get mad, the best thing you could do was shut up and get on. Because you wasn't going to win. So, if you want to follow a winning example, we follow after Jesus. But it's so easy to let's do what everybody else is doing. Isn't it? But that's the reason that Christians get so caught up in the harvest of the world, because they follow the wrong example. We have but one example, and that's Jesus.
Amen.
What the world's doing shouldn't affect our vision.
Come on.
It shouldn't affect the race that we're in. I mean, you know, yeah, things happen, but I'm talking about it shouldn't take our eyes off our goal.
Amen.
Webster says, one of the definitions, the example said it's a pattern one sets to be followed or not to be followed. In other words, whatever the result is, you can understand, but when you see folks doing that, whatever the result is, if you do that, you're going to wind up in that kind of result. So, we look at the consequences to understand, to know whether or not we want to experience the results. And Paul was writing to the Corinthian people, and he was telling them the things that had happened to Israel. He was showing them, don't do this because you see what happened to Israel. He said Israel was our example. Because Israel was God's people, folks. They were God's chosen people. But when they turned after another example, things didn't go well with them. And 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter, we'll start reading about the 6th verse. Paul said this. He's just got through telling them some things that happened to Israel back in their history. He said, now these things were our example, to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they lusted. Neither Be ye idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed and fell in one day 320,000. Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed of serpents. Neither murmur ye, as some of them murmured and were destroyed of the destroyed. Now all these things happened to them for examples. There it is again. And they were written for our admonitions, upon whom the end of the world is come. What Paul was saying, if we follow after these examples, we'll wind up with that result that they wound up with. And then turn over to Romans 11. And we're going to read verse 15. Talking about Israel. See, Israel kept rebelling against God. God who had brought them through so much and had promised them and had covenanted with them. They kept rebelling against God till they reached the point to where they could not see who they were. They couldn't see what God was doing. They were blinded by following after the examples of the people of the land where God had sent them, had given them. And finally, the Spirit of God left them. Paul said this, for if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall be the receiving of them be but life from the dead? He said that they were cast away so that the rest of the world could have a chance to know God. That Spirit moved from Israel. Up until the time, folks, that Israel crucified Christ, the Spirit of God was not moving among the Gentile nations. They weren't coming. They dealt solely with the nation of Israel. Everything was focused on. This is a Jewish book, folks. This book came because of God's covenant with Israel. And in verse 25 he said, for I would not, brethren, that you be ignorant of the mystery, lest you be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel unto the fullness of the Gentiles come in. He said, he just told them, Israel was our example. He said, don't be wise in your own conceit. They became blind because they didn't walk after God. And what he's saying here, the Gentiles, when the fullness of the Gentiles come in, that Spirit's going back to Israel, they'll be blinded if they're walking after the same things. Can you see the blindness happening?
Yes, sir.
Where people can look right after what is true and not see what's true? See, the blindness happened because Israel rejected the truth. And Paul is saying, hey, when they rejected it, they were cut off and the Gentiles had their chance, but the time will come when the Gentiles will also be blinded and the Spirit of God will go back to Israel. They'll go blind. If there's ever been a time, folks, when blindness is very evident, it's the day that we're living in. I turned the TV on, and I've got a bunch of people in the Church of God, and this ain't what the Church of God teaches. And I've been contemplating on writing some of them and saying, hey, you ought to go investigate. This guy said he'd just run a revival in the Church of God in Tampa. And he had a big audience. I don't know what church he was in. Then he had a big audience. He said, I'm not a member of the Church of God. He said, but I am born again. And then he began to talk how so many young people was disenfranchised by the church of today. And he said, let me tell you, God don't care what kind of relationship you're in, whether it's same sex or whatever. He said, he don't care who you're sleeping with, as long as you got it on the blood. And I like to fell out of the chair. See, he is leading a bunch of folks in the wrong direction because the audience was clapping and hallelujah. He said he came out of the revival and said there was a young man on the street and said, you know, he had his pants down to his knees like they do and tattooed with earrings, and said the Spirit of God just drew him over there. No, some spirit did.
Come on, sir.
But he said, he asked the young man, was he in the service? And said, the young man said, yeah. He said, but you know, preacher, all gods are the one. All gods are the same God. He said, yes, but you know, only Christ died for you. He said, that's the reason I'm wearing this cross. Folks, you can wear all the crosses you want to wear and die lost unless you're following this Jesus. See, that young man went away from there thinking, I'm fine. This preacher that's been just preached this great revival has just told me, yeah, all gods are the same. Wrong example.
Come on, sir. Come on, sir.
Wrong example. See, what he is teaching will bring the blindness.
Yes, it will.
It will bring the blindness. The fullness one day, folks, the fullness of the Gentiles will come in. See, I don't think we understand the urgency of this thing sometimes. Someday soon, the last Gentile that is going to be saved in this dispensation will be saved. And the church will vanish. And chaos will break out all over the world.
Yes, it will. Come on, sir.
And the Spirit of God will move back to the Jew. But the blindness of the Gentiles will come and is coming, just on the same principle that it came to Israel. It's because we have begun to follow the wrong example.
Come on, sir.
We're following the example that the world sets and not the example that Jesus set. See, the Lord told Daniel in the 9th chapter of Daniel, he said that there was 70 weeks determined upon his people Israel. And that word weeks there is the word Shabuah. It's a Hebrew word, and it means weeks of years. Or 490 years. He said, for 490 years, Daniel, I will deal with Israel. 483 years after that proclamation, the Jewish nation rose up and rejected Messiah. They were partakers of the crucifixion of Christ. That left 7 years left that God said he would deal with Israel. That prophecy of the 70 weeks ended when Christ died and the Spirit of God began to move to the Gentiles. Because blindness had set over on Israel and they didn't recognize Jesus and they were partakers of his crucifixion. They've got one more week left. We call it the Great Tribulation. The Jewish prophets called it the time of Jacob's trouble. But they said he would be delivered out of it. And the reason he's delivered out of it, folks, is because Christ comes back with the Gentile church.
Come on.
To save the remnant of the Jew. That's how the deliverance out of the Great Tribulation for the remnant of the Jew happens.
Come on, sir.